tell us about a movie that's out and interesting.
Okay. So Lee, this is a labour of love project for Kate Winslet, who stars in it as American war photographer Lee Miller. You'll remember that when Kirsten Dunst came on to talk about her role in Civil War, she talked about being inspired by Lee Miller.
She did,
so she
yes.
Winslet stars in the film. She's also a producer. There is a story that at one point she was paying for the production herself when funds weren't forthcoming. So this has been going for a long time. Directed by Alan Curris, who's an acclaimed cinematographer whose CV includes Eternal Sunshine, in which she worked with Kate Winslet. And the story goes that she came across a book about Lee Miller, thought that Lee Miller bore a resemblance to Kate Winslet, gave Kate Winslet the book. Anyway, whatever. So script went through several versions, but it's based on a book called The Lives of Lee Miller by Anthony Penrose, who's the son and who was on board with the production and gave them access to the Lee Miller archive. So the central conceit has Lee Miller, late in her life, being interviewed by a young man played by your friend and mine, Josh O'Connor. She's pottering around the house, drinking, surrounded by the detritus of her career which saw her going from being a model, famed for being the modern girl, to then an acclaimed photographer. I mean, she collaborated with people like Man Ray, to a groundbreaking photojournalist who did extraordinary frontline work in World War II. And she says, why do you want to know my story? And he says, I want to know the story behind these pictures. And then the film then moves back in time to the story of her life, to her meeting the British painter Roland Penrose, played here by Alexander Skarsgård, who I think originally it was Jude Law, but then he couldn't do it. Anyway, France, 1930s, teaming up with David Sherman, played by Andy Samberg, who was the life correspondent with whom she then went to Europe to send back photographs from the Second World War. She sent those photographs back to her editor, Audrey Withers, played by Andrea Riseborough, so you can see it's star-studded, who was her editor at Vogue, and who found some of the pictures, at least according to the film, very, very strong. Here's a brief clip.
These are mine. I took them. I decide what happens to them. Please. Stop! They're an historical record! Well, who cares? Nobody saw them. You didn't print them. I fought for them, Lee. I fought for them. These must be preserved. What, to sit in a filing cabinet? The ministry thought they may disturb people. This happened. This really happened. Lee, this happened. These images will disturb people more than they've already been disturbed. People need to move on.
So, as you can tell from that, I mean, it's a powerful film dealing with some very dark subject matter, the need to provide eyewitness accounts of the horrors of the world and the toll that that being that eyewitness takes upon, the person. In the interview scenes, she regularly returns to the idea that you can tell that she's been traumatized by what she's seen. And that is all, I think, done very well. However, the most important thing is the film also has, life and vivacity to it. I mean, Lee Miller was a rebellious soul. She was a muse to the likes of Cocteau, and there's famously a photograph of her taken in Hitler's bathtub on the day that Hitler killed himself, with the dust from Dachau on her boots on this kind of white mat on the floor. It's like it's a really famous and very, very rebellious image. It's not an easy role to play because in many ways she was a larger than life character, and I think Winslet does it brilliantly. She plays her as somebody who has got all this stuff going on, and is larger than life, and yet she plays her in a way that makes you completely believe in her. I mean, there's very little Kate Winslet can't do. She can do science fiction, she can do action, she can do comedy. She can apparently hold her breath underwater for longer than anybody else in the movie industry. She is, as David Bowie would say, chameleon, comedian, Corinthian, but crucially not caricature. And I think that's important. You have to have a fully rounded portrait of somebody who is larger than life but believable. Cast also includes Marion Cotillard, Naomi Melon. A really, really impressive cast, all of whom do a pretty good job of establishing sort of thumbnail images of the characters that they're playing. Very handsomely shot by the same cinematographer that shot The Pianist. If I have a reservation, it's that I think that maybe the wraparound of the interview feels a little contrived. But that's a very minor reservation when you consider just how much the film is attempting to deal with. I mean, I think it's Winslet's, I think it's one of her best roles. I think it's up there with Mayor of Easttown, which I absolutely loved. And I think it is, you can tell it's a labour of love project for her. And I've now seen it twice. And I have to say, the second time round, I was really struck by how well it manages a very complicated narrative. Anyway, it's called Lee.
And that's a cinematic release, presumably.
It's a cinematic release, it is.
Okay,
And I think it needs to be seen on the big screen.